It's lovely to be here with you. I just got back from BBRC, had an amazing retreat, got to teach with two people I'm very close to, and I agreed to do this because I wanted to stay in that sweet spot of uh, kind of like making the teachings the center of everything. So we'll do a little meditation. This is, we only have an hour. I just came from a group that was, closer to 2 hours, but we'll meditate for 25 minutes maybe, and then I'll um, do a little dharmet on a teaching I really enjoy, and then I'll have a little opportunity for discussion. So finding a way to be as comfortable as you can in your seat. This is really helpful for our meditation practice. It's also helpful if we're able and it's comfortable to sit upright. A sense of bringing a sense of wakefulness to our mind through our posture. And closing the eyes or softening the gaze. And bringing the attention inward. Noticing in this moment, is there a problem to be solved? Some version of too much of something, not enough of something, or just a sense of vacillation. And if it's one of those moments where there's not a problem to be solved, then savor that. It's a moment of freedom. Remember what that feels like. And if there's a problem to be solved, which is sort of the normal state of things, you can just see if you can just soften even just one iota. Softening the fixing mind, and then softening the body. Quite often, when there's a problem to be solved, there's resonance of that shows up in the body as tension or a sense of energy being blocked. See if you can just gently invite all of that to soften. You can literally soften the jaw, soften the neck and the shoulders, maybe the shoulders dropping down and back, even a fraction of an inch. Softening the chest, softening the belly. And then taking a few moments to soften any part of the body that would benefit from some softening. See if you can let go of anything that's extra. And then letting the attention rest on the feeling of the breath moving through the body. And letting everything else kind of fade into the background. Don't have to push anything away. Thoughts still happening. Sounds may be happening in the environment, just not engaging with them. Letting the mind just rest on the feeling of the breath, moving in and out of the body. In the simplest way, breathing in, knowing that you're breathing in, breathing out, knowing that you're breathing out. Letting go of any agenda and just resting in the awareness of this breathing body. Can be helpful to bring a sense of interest to the breath, noticing without any judgment if the breath is shallow or deep. Noticing without any judgment whether the breath is like more coarse or more fine or some other texture of the breath. And without needing to change anything, noticing the rhythm of your breathing. Or maybe it's more arrhythmic. Perhaps noticing the parts of the body where the breath is most prominent. And then maybe even noticing how different parts of the cycle of breath feel different. Maybe noticing the moments of stillness and the cycle of breathing. Maybe noticing the energetic of breathing. Usually a sense of invigoration on the inhale and relaxing on the exhale. And just receiving this flow of sensations, letting everything else more or less rest in the background. And all this investigation in the frame of simplicity, breathing in, aware of the in breath, breathing out, aware of the out breath. And every time you notice that the attention has wandered, just softening and beginning again. It's this returning again and again to our experience. That's the heart of the meditation practice. There's no need to make anything happen. Just allowing nature to move through us. And continuing to rest the attention on the feeling of the breath moving in and out of the body. If there's some strong experience that won't stay in the background, you can bring it to the foreground and imagine as if the breath were moving through this experience, mixing and mingling with a particular part of the body that might be in discomfort, as a kind of inner massage or balm. Steady, gentle effort to keep the attention on the feeling of the breath. We can end our period of practice by bringing to mind someone or something that we have a sense of gratitude for. And then connecting with gratitude as a feeling in the body. Noticing where gratitude resides. Maybe it has a shape or a texture or an energetic. And then letting the inner smile of gratitude come forth in even the slightest outward expression of a smile, the half smile of the Buddha, which is actually a practice instruction to uplift and gladden the mind. And then letting the sound of the bell draw the attention outward while maintaining this same quality of presence and attentiveness. Thank you, everybody. I would love to see more of your faces, if that's at all possible. My teacher, Trudy, always said meditation is a come as you are party, so however you are, it's just fine. Um, Today I wanted to share a teaching from the Buddha. It's Vitakka Santana Sutta. Sometimes this is translated as um, strategies for removing distracting thoughts. This is something that, people sometimes think of meditation as being about. Um, there are some strategies, like, more or less we tell people, like, just be aware of your thoughts, and we don't have that much control, and we can be at ease even when the mind is racing. But then there are also some strategies, kind of our middle way between these kinds of two ways of practicing. So I'm just going to begin by sharing a video with you. It's just about a minute long. Somebody can signal me if you can't hear it when I press play.
Ladies, have you ever remember the time when you had a moment of silence in your head? Doesn't happen, does it? No. Always thinking. Sometimes you can't even sleep because you won't shut the hell up. You in the bed and your mind is just racing about nothing. I need to talk to her tomorrow because I ain't like the way she spoke to me today. And I'm not going to have this uncomfortable thing going on between us. Did I lock the door? I should have bought those shoes. Where's my high school yearbook? Ooh, what you gonna have for lunch tomorrow? I don't know. Why you think about lunch? You need to have a good breakfast. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start every morning with a good breakfast. Maybe I'll start that low carb diet. That seems to be working for a lot of people. What was my third grade English teacher's name? What was her name? Miss Jones, Miss Jenkins. Whoa, it's late. I need to be asleep. What the hell am I doing up? I don't know. Let me think about it. Ladies, have you ever remember the time when you had a moment of silence?
Okay. Anyway, I think this is a very colorful and humorous way to describe an experience that we all probably know really well. And the Buddha described this experience as papancha. I love that word, papancha. It means something like proliferation of thought. And in this sutta I'm going to share with you, there are 5 strategies for dealing with proliferation of thought. And normally I would give this talk in about 45 minutes to an hour, but I love this teaching so much, I thought I would just condense it for you for this shorter format time period we have. So the first strategy is to replace the thoughts. I did some slides. These are, I'll confess, these are AI slides, so I'm not really looked at them closely. But the first strategy is to replace the unhelpful thoughts with more skillful thoughts. And the Buddha described this as just as a skilled carpenter or their apprentice might knock out, remove, and extract a coarse peg by means of a fine peg. The practitioner gives attention to some other sign connected to that which is wholesome. So when you're experiencing these recursive thoughts that are, we would say they're unwholesome because they don't lead to our own well-being or benefit, they don't lead to the benefit of others typically. Of course, we have to notice that. This is part of why we sit, practice, cultivate awareness, and then substitute the thoughts. If you have a metta practice, you could substitute thoughts of, may you be happy, or may I be happy, may I be at ease, may I be well. Can substitute, I sometimes use a mantra in my meditation. The mantra I use is Bu Do, which is like the Buddha within, our own potential for awakening. And so when the thoughts come, I'm just like usually coordinating with my breath. So it's like boo, inhale, do, exhale, boo, do. And so I'm directing my attention at more wholesome thoughts. The unwholesome thoughts will lose their momentum. Uh, it's the Vitaka Santana Sutta. Um, so the second um, strategy is essentially to feel. Well, the way it's couched is to examine the disadvantages of that line of thinking. And we feel the suffering in a certain kind of thought formation. We can actually feel how it's not leading to our own well-being. And the way the Buddha described this, very graphic, but he said, just as a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around their neck. Um, AI doesn't do a good job, so this looks like a live snake, but imagine that it's a dead snake. And this is incredibly powerful, and this idea, this image of disgust is something that appears in the teachings, and it's kind of like that feeling where the mind is going down that sort of rutted way of thinking, whatever that is for you, worrying, catastrophizing, um, and we just see, oh, this is really painful. Now, usually we have a sense that it's painful, but it's sort of like we're just trying to get rid of it more than resting in the discomfort of that. Where is the discomfort of a racing mind? Um, Coming close to that, being intimate with it. And then we realize, wow, this is terrible. And that's part of the catalyst that leads us to keep practicing and the catalyst that lets us let go of it. Obviously, if we woke up and there was a carcass of a snake around our neck, we would just immediately toss it off. Is we're going to develop that relationship with our afflictive thoughts so that eventually we can just toss them away, change the channel. They say in smoking cessation that one of the most effective treatments is mindful smoking. And so basically, the patients are said, you smoke whenever you want, however much you want. You just can't do it in social settings or while drinking. And when you do it, to be fully with the experience of smoking. So all the things that go into it, the smell, the taste. I've never been a smoker, but I love the satisfaction of a lighter click, the little sound and that tactile feeling, and then there's a flame. And whatever high percentage of people who benefit from this intervention just report that they realize how disgusting it is. It actually doesn't taste that good, doesn't smell that good, doesn't feel that good. And that becomes a catalyst for being able to let go of that habit. So the first one, knocking out the coarse peg with a fine peg, replacing the thoughts. The second one, reflecting on the effect of those thoughts. And then the third one is to ignore them. Just let them be. Just don't get involved with them. Let them be in the background. And when we're meditating, I very much have a sense of like foreground and background. Like if my hands were my breath, I'm just focusing on my breath, and you're all still there. Thoughts are still there, but I'm not giving them my attention. I might be aware of them, but I'm not making them the primary focus of my attention. And most things in the thinking realm that we don't give attention to, they lose their steam. So I did a slide for this one too. Let's see. So we just notice the unwholesome thought. If we can do it as it arises, that's great, but usually we do it in retrospect. And then the Buddha's example was like a person with good sight, not wanting to see a form, would just look away. And we place our attention somewhere else on something that is wholesome and neutral. And this is one of the ways that I've heard practice described that I find really appealing. Like one way to talk about Dharma practice, meditation practice, is that we're developing the wisdom to know where to rest the mind. You could say rest the attention. More poignantly, you could say knowing where to rest the heart. And in an intentionally challenged world, this is not easy. There are so many things, most of us, calling for our attention. What's most worthy of our attention in any moment? And the metric for that is what leads to the maximum well-being for ourselves and those around us. So developing the wisdom to know where to rest the heart, and then the meditative ability to actually do that. So, Wanda Sykes is describing this process that's just out of control. We don't have any stewardship over the mind when we're in this papancha state. But when we practice meditation, like we just did, where we're training the mind to be steady on the experience of breathing, we're developing more stewardship about where we're directing our attention. And when we bring mindfulness into our daily life, to be aware of the thinking that's happening, how it's affecting us, we develop this capacity to, I call it changing the channel. Like we just been there, I've seen that, gone down that path. It leads nowhere good, so I'm going to just change the channel. So substituting a thought is the first strategy. Noticing the disadvantages of the thought is the second strategy. The third strategy is ignoring it. The fourth strategy is the way the Buddha talks about it is giving attention to the stilling of thoughts. And the example that he uses is a person walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk more slowly? And then they would walk slowly and they might consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? Why am I standing? What if I sit? Why am I sitting? What if I lie down? By doing so, they would substitute for each grosser posture one that was subtler. So this is really like noticing that the papancha mind is often driven by a kind of internal restlessness, the restlessness of like we're moving a little bit too fast for what's required. I personally experience this as if, and this happens when I get excited, that it's like I'm engaged in something, but at the same time I'm like waving my arms around, or like there's just like a lot of extra energy in the experience that's not necessary. And so I just like make an intention to like settle that down, to downshift, to move, as the Buddha says, to a more subtle posture. One thing that I do, which we just all do together, like I'll put my hands at a kind of high level to represent the level of energy in the system. And then we'll take a deep breath in, and as we exhale, kind of move the hands down with this sense of like we're calming the system. We'll do that one more time. So deep, deep inhale, and then exhale. Sometimes I'll do that a few times just to like have a kind of visual somatic representation of something that's calming the system, moving into a subtler posture. Um, and so it's, you know, slowing down. That's probably the essence of that idea. And making the relationship between the amount of energy in the body and how it affects the mind. So the first strategy, replace the thoughts with better thoughts. The second strategy, notice their disadvantages. The third strategy, ignore them. The fourth strategy, calming the energy. Um, and then the fifth strategy is said to best if used sparingly. Sometimes this is described as the method of last resort. And there is a kind of sense in the teaching that, you go in that order of things. But I'm not sure. It's kind of like the Eightfold Path has an order. It starts with wise view, but we don't really practice that way. It's kind of more like a wheels on a spoke. So the last strategy, occasional last resort, is crushing mind with mind, is the way the Buddha describes it. And he says, with teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, one beats down, constrains, and crushes the mind, just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head and shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him. It's funny is like, we talk about Buddhism as a path of peace, but there are these like violent images in it. And this is more like the way you might interact with a dog. If the dog is crossing the street and about to go into traffic, you say, stop or sit. And you say it with some energy, but it's not the energy of aversion. You don't hate the dog. It's not ill will. It's actually just getting the dog's attention. You might do this with a child too. Stop. It's like a little bit of force in it. Um, the reason it's the last resort kind of thing is that it's hard to do without aversion. It's hard to do without the feeling of I'm doing this because I can't stand the mind being busy. Sometimes for me, it's more like I'll say to myself, if the mind is just in a distracted state, I'll just like say, come on, Gullu, get it together, or enough, as just a kind of encouragement to practice, to see that we can have some stewardship of the mind. And this is iterative. I just shared this story, but I'll share it again. It's called Autobiography in 6 Short Chapters. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I still don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. It takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there, but I still fall in. It's a habit. It's my fault. I know where I am. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down a different street. Chapter 6, I walk down a new street. There's a hole in the sidewalk and I fall in. And I love this it's like a silly little story, but I love it because to me, it so aptly describes like a really healthy attitude towards our meditation practice. That it just takes time. And we fall into the same traps again and again until we don't. And we become more wise, less apt to fall in those holes the more we practice. Um, I have so many more things to say, but I'm going to stop there and just create some space for anybody that would have a question or a comment. Victoria, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I didn't remember the protocol here, so I didn't know if I did the electronic hand. Um, I uh, I've been trying to practice for years now, and I just um, I don't know, talk about the restlessness. Really struggle to this day, even though I do a lot of, I attend a lot of sanghas and things in an attempt to improve. Um, the sitting, walking's the best for me. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm very inarticulate. I've been finding that practice in daily life is really, I can see improvement in my life in so many different ways. And it seems that I am getting somewhere with that, that I'm getting, closer to some kind of peace. But the formal meditation is still incredibly daunting for me. And so I'm just wondering um, if in the context of, of these instructions, you can add a little bit of specific wisdom for what to do. Because I think also that, I mean, I spiral into self-criticism and self-judgment. And I mean, it just becomes this huge, unmanageable papancha that it's hasn't reduced over the years. So I'm just wondering what to do about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a kind of a common experience that, it's vital that we have some seed of, you could say verified faith, faith that comes from that. We've seen that the practice helps us in some way. And because that keeps us going through when it's, frustrating or hard or it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere. Um, and I share these strategies because it's sort of good to have them in your back pocket. And then I usually am encouraging people not to use them because there are times when it might be helpful to develop the ability to use a strategy to calm down. But what's even more helpful is if we can find some ease in the midst of a busy mind. We find some ease even when the mind is perseverating on a problem, or um, that's the ultimate strategy, because when we find that ease within the experience, whatever it might be, I think restlessness is sort of uh, the zeitgeist of this moment, at least in the United States, that anxiety, dread, fear, that when we find some ease in the midst of that, then the experience of that is transformed and the intensity of it goes down. It's the familiarity of this is the Buddha's seminal teaching, the First Noble Truth. To, I like the way the Tibetan folks they say meditate on what provokes resentment. Like wherever the ouch is in our experience, that's where we direct our attention. That's where we rest the heart. Um, because in the familiarity with that which is unpleasant or scary or uncomfortable or discombobulating, um, we begin to see how actually not solid that thing is, how it's always changing. I was speaking to someone on this retreat that just ended. I was just at Big Bear, and this person said, I'm sad all the time. And then I told them a joke, and I said, "Are you sad now in this moment?" And she said, "No, not in this moment." But like so, like things are always shifting. We have a tendency to kind of reify things or make things more solid than they actually are. And one of the things that has been most beneficial to me in this practice is seeing how quickly the mind changes. And so to not get too overly disturbed by any particular mind state. And you see this in children. I just recently I was around some children, and it was late at night, and it's like, oh, I'm so tired. And then it was the grandparents, because parents wouldn't do this. Grandparents are like, you want some ice cream? And they're like, ice cream! Suddenly there's like all this energy in the system. And, none of us are children, but the mind is like that. It's very changeable. Aaron, Aaron, tell me how to say your name.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Irene,
Irene, great.
how do you differentiate that third step of like ignore or change the channel? How do you make sure that you're not avoiding or like having a reaction of avoiding like aversion and or craving, like, okay, I don't want to think about this, so I'm gonna do something else that makes me happy. It's because I'm going to avoid, how do you differentiate those two? One seems like it's a skillful action and the other, I feel like I could mistaken the two.
This is a really good question, and this is the wisdom that we develop the more and more we practice. The wisdom to know where to rest the heart. Like sometimes it is like the best strategy, I'll put in quotes, is to just feel the aversion. Just sit in the fire of being irritated or even being enraged, and to become familiar with that experience, to know it deeply, to develop some ease. Like at least if we know it deeply, we won't be as scared of it. And then other times, it's we could try all these different approaches and develop a kind of facility for what makes the most sense in the environment that we're in. If you're on a meditation retreat, I just came back from a meditation retreat, there might be more emphasis on just feeling whatever's arising, whatever's happening. If I'm on the road and I get road rage, it might be better to just like kind of push that down a little bit so I can be safe. Um, None of these strategies should be the only strategy. As you rightly point out, if we ignore everything, then there's a kind of bypass, and we're not living our life fully. Like part of developing mindfulness is to live in the fullness of life. So we experience all the highs and the lows with greater um, enjoyment and intensity and verve. I don't know what the right word is. Um, so you try them out. You develop this wisdom by trying out different approaches and seeing. When we develop a sense of what's most skillful in this moment. Let's see, one more had something in the chat. There is something to kind of exposure therapy, especially with, like I seem to be working with anxiety with a lot of people, and anxiety doesn't feel good and it's scary, but it's butterflies in the stomach, clenching of the jaw, tightening of the neck. Like when you break it down like that, it's not intolerable. It's quite, yeah, it's not great. It's not something we would choose, but it doesn't have to collapse us or define us in some way.